update here. I've made updates for a little while now, but apparently the cameras I got, the wasps, have decided to die. So we're trying to get everything caught up all at once. Black 95 all-wheel drive turbo Talon. Blew the motor up. It is over here. It kicked the balance shaft and rod out the block. It tore stuff up pretty good. So this is the other motor, ready to go. Head studs are over there somewhere. I don't have all the washers. I've seemed to have lost them. I've only got 4. I need 6 more. So putting just probably factory head bolts in for now and get it fired up. Most of those still gaskets. I went through and ported. I need to put the head back together, but I ported and polished the intake. This damn cam sensor stuck under. Port and polished the intake. And just ported exhaust. Nothing special on it, just took some material out. Port matched and polished the intake runners. Took a little bit off the throttle body edge there, nothing crazy. There's another spare head I got laying around. Yeah, so I put that back together, stock cams, a pile of DSM manuals, and DSM GM computers. I've got an FP manifold back here and a 20G that I believe seals leak, but I have an HX35 right there. Need to find a compressor housing that somehow disappeared. And then I have a MA Performance turbo manifold. Pretty much I bought the car bone stock. Old man owned it. He had a fresh head put on and timing belt job before I got it, and then it started knocking. I bought it from him super cheap, got a deal, and I had a primer black Eclipse that was rotted out and rusted, so I pulled the black leather interior out of the Eclipse and did an interior swap on this because this one was vinyl gray, whatever you want to call it. Then it's got DSM link, 3-bar map. It's got a PTC 3800 stall converter. Had an Aeromotive 340 pump in it, but I took the 340 pump out, and it is now in the WRX. So then over here, 96 Eagle Talon, TSI all-wheel drive manual car. I mean, the basic, it's like a pretty much an early 2000s version of what you do back then. This is it. It had old school everything, a piggyback, like super duper duper like base of what you would build back in the day. Gretty blow off valve, the elbow, little front mount, 16G J pipe intake, and it's got, I believe it's got an upgraded clutch. I'm not sure what. I just did the poly mount inserts. The transmission would not go in or stay in third. It would try to go in, it was just grind and kick right back out. Pulled the trans apart because I was going to put a spare trans I had laying around, but I was not 100% sure on what the issue was, or how, the inside. I want to take it apart and clean it. So I pulled his stock transmission apart. What had happened was the shift forks over time had worn down, like 1.5 millimeter on one and 2 millimeter on the other shift fork, to the point of where it would not, like, the third, fourth shift fork was messed up, so it would not engage. So I took the shift forks and the counter shaft with the third, fourth synchro and hub, the whole shaft, and put it in that transmission and put the transmission back in. It now has fifth. Or not fifth, but third. It now has third. So then it had a slight stutter issue. Put a step coder plug in it. Check the plug wires. They ohmed out right where they're supposed to be. So I added another ground and cleaned up the grounds and added new terminals. Did an evap canister delete and all the purge valve stuff and the vents. All that crap's gone. Went through, and then I put my DSM link on it because the piggyback was just nothing but a pain, and I couldn't figure out for sure if that was the issue, if something inside of it had went bad. So I knew my PCM worked. I started taking good parts off of my car that I knew worked and putting it on this. And lo and behold, I tried a couple different injectors, and then I swapped out the coil pack and the igniter, and the higher RPM stutter went away. So then, but it is a 5-speed cloth interior car, which I thought was kind of odd and weird. Very nice car nonetheless. Plans on getting body work done and getting it resprayed the factory color and repainted back to how it should be. So then talk about the Trans Am. WS6 Trans Am 98. The worst year as far as the oddball BS that it has. You know, the oddball computer, all the nonsense. Oh, little truck action. The ranger's trying to get him. Okay. So, at least they're not squatted. So I bought the Trans Am with a truck 5.3 and a 4L60E junk transmission. Had a converter in it. It ran okay for what it was. Wasn't horrible. Drove the car for 3 days, and third and fourth went out of the transmission. So I pulled the transmission out, pulled it apart, ordered a rebuild kit for it, a rebuild kit in it, put it back in, shifted fine. While I had the trans out, I had gotten a cam from a buddy. It was a hot cam, a GM hot cam or something. Put it in, and it ran okay. It sounded good. It ran okay. It still wasn't quite what I was looking for. It just didn't have the pep, but eventually that motor started to pick up a slight knock. So I then pulled that motor out, and the engine I had put together for the S10, which at the time, I mean, it's the same combo now, but at the time it was in this originally Gen 453, 243 newer heads. All I did was take off the sharp edges in the combustion chamber with a Dremel, and then it's got a sloppy stage 2 cam, pack 12/18 springs. I regapped the rings at 28 thousandths all the way around, and this has got a turbo 400. But so I pulled the motor out of that, put it in that car. Night and day difference. Then that car decided that the PCM was going to die. You know, the 98s had the oddball PCM that's like 512 megabyte or some crap. Really, really slow, and it doesn't have a whole lot of support. So I then, in an AutoZone parking lot till about 2 o'clock in the morning, I had the girlfriend bring me a truck computer I had laying around. So I re-pinned the 98 ECU harness for a newer style PCM, and then drove it since then. That thing was a complete fun animal for the most part. So then did a rear mount turbo setup on it, and it was real laggy, just because it's got long tubes and a 3-inch. It just didn't want to spool. So then I built a front setup for it, but with the crappy flux welder I've got, I couldn't get it to penetrate the cast well enough to the point where it would actually hold, and it kept trying to just break at the cast manifold every time. So I mean, I got it to run for a couple of days before it broke, and it was fun. So after that, I said, fuck it, pulled apart, and then put the Talon Mishimoto intercooler on it. It's got a Walbro 255 in the factory tank, Turbo 400, and I rewired the computer myself. Needed to clean up some wiring still. Used the Dodge thermostat piece. There's also DSM radiator. It's got Flowtech turbo header on this side that I had to massage and weld to go around it. Made a computer mount, mounted the coils. You see them down there and there on that side, and then down here on that side, and then it's got a E-bait up, like a pretty much supposed to be a header, a turbo header that goes down, but I flipped it up to make it work for the time being until my TIG welder gets here tomorrow, where I can actually make, you know, a legit use cast manifolds and do it right, because I know that'll weld properly. It's got an On3 7875 VS Racing wastegate. This is all flux welded crap. And then I did cut hole and did teardrops, which has got tennis balls in for now. But she is there. Only thing left for this truck right now is a drive shaft. I've got 800cc or 80-pound injectors, however you want to say it. It's the same regardless any way you shoot. So 80-pound injectors, fuel systems ran. I used a factory fuel rails on the truck intake. It was a Dorman truck intake, a replacement one. I used the factory fuel rails off of that. Went down, clicked it into I had some lines that were cut from the junkyard, clicked it into one, put a little bead around it, and then connected for the return, connected that down to the factory return for the S10, and then put the factory feed on a hose that ran up. It was the black fuel hose that I got in there, not stainless steel braided, but it's the same style hose. Ran that up into an AN fitting that went into an elbow that clicked onto the factory fuel setup. These wheels and tires were on the Trans Am also. I'll overlay a couple videos of that with that car, and kind of making some passes and goofing off. But so this is a stock 8.8. Stock 8.8. And then it's got a rebuilt TH400 I got from Kentucky with a shift kit. Still kind of waiting on it to see what it does. I built a cross member out of the stock S10 piece up to some tubing I had laying around to the other part of the S10 factory piece to the factory mount. Use the other side. So I am just waiting for a drive shaft. That's the only thing I have left to do. That'll be ordered here soon. Man, got a 92 240 Volvo. It bought $150. Bought it for $150. It needed a $2 cam seal in the back of the head. It was just pouring oil. He thought the motor mounts were so bad that he thought it cracked the block. So I put a cam. I bought it anyways, regardless. I was going to LS swap it or fix it. So I put a cam seal in it, put a rotor and pads on the back, and I've drove the hell out of this thing. I got it 3 years ago, and it has 330 some thousand miles on the gauge cluster, and he had it for 4 or 5 years and drove it daily, and the gauge cluster quit working before he got it. So this thing's probably got $500,000 or more. It is just, it's a manual, non-turbo. It's beat up as hell. 2.3 liter. But the plan for this is whenever either one of the other dailies is back together and done, S10 is going to be more of like a street truck anyways. Get the Talon going, or the GTP needs wheel bearings. We'll get to it in a second. Once I can get one of those dailies together, the plan is to then 4.8 or 5.3 in the Volvo, and an 80E, which I got an 80 in there in the garage now. Here's my 2000 Grand Prix GTP Daytona 500 edition. I did a resonator muffler delete on it myself. Just use the stock tips, nothing fancy. Built an intake out of an old Cummins intercooler elbow and a tune basically. And she's peppy. She's not bad. I'd like to do a pulley and port the blower myself. And then I've got the O2 Subaru WRX. It's the girlfriend's daily. She had originally blown up the cruise she had, so we bought that silver one. Drove to Ohio to get it. So go to leave, get to about Beckley, West Virginia, and the Volvo breaks the timing belt sitting in traffic at a toll booth. So sitting in traffic, breaks the timing belt. We pull over at the toll booth, and I thought something else maybe had happened, so I start pulling apart, checking and seeing, because I had some fuel issue early on the mass airflow, and I had cleaned it, and it seemed to fix it. So I thought maybe it was that issue to begin with too. So I start looking, and I peek the top of the timing belt cover off, and sure enough, it's broken in half. Good thing Volvo makes their shit indestructible, non-interference motor. So being that closest timing belt was about 20 minutes away, it was like 10 or 15 bucks. So I finally figure out that the girl who owned this car, she drove her Integra down from Columbus, Ohio to Beckley, West Virginia to come get us. She got there at 10 o'clock at night. This was supposed to be a there and back trip and be back home probably by, the next morning, but that wasn't the case. She come and got us, drove us all the way up to Columbus in a 2-door DC Integra. We get up there, I get out, and I start looking, and by the pictures we seen, it looked decent. It had the rocker covers on too, so you couldn't tell. But from the front end with the bumper on it, like the pictures, you couldn't really see, but a little bit of rust in the quarters, and I wasn't worried about it. And the rockers didn't look real bad. So I was like, okay, be a decent car. So the pictures, it had, Cobb 3-port boost controller, Mishimoto couplers for the intercooler. It looked like maybe an STI intercooler on it. Big NVIDIA downpipe, and all the way back to a muffler and just 3-inch, and that's it. And the muffler's got pipe run through it, so it's a little bit louder. But it's got some basic stuff and a Mishi radiator. So I was like, okay, we get up there. This is the only means of getting back to the Volvo, so I at that time have to buy it. So we just jump in, we exchange the money, grab the title, jump in, and we head back. So we start getting down the road, and I mean, it runs like doo-doo. You try and get in it, and it's like falling and stumbling on its face and acting up crazy. So we limp it back to West Virginia, to Beckley, go to the parts store, wait for them to open, because we got to Columbus, Ohio probably 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 something, and then drove down and got back there probably 7-ish, 8 in the morning on a Sunday morning, I believe. So get back, get down to the parts store, get a timing belt, go ahead, and it's got a number 3 cylinder misfire, so I can get a coil, put a coil in it, get some plugs, because they had fucking AC Doka plugs in this thing. So I get some actual NGK plugs put in it, and I had a little bit of some MAF cleaner, and I cleaned the MAF, and it seemed to run a lot better. Get back to the Volvo. We had already taken it apart while the girl was coming to get us. So when we get back, all you gotta do is put it on. So in like 10-15 minutes, the Volvo's back together, and I teach my buddy I work with, rode up with me. I gave him a 30-second tutorial on how to drive a manual. He had never drove before, and off we went, driving 5 hours back to North Carolina. So we get about halfway, and this thing's really starting to run like doo-doo. I'm running out of mass airflow cleaner. I'm trying everything. It'd barely get out of its own way, and you can only push the throttle about that much, probably just enough to get it moving and hold speed. Anymore, it'd just stumble and fall on its face. We had to limp it back at 60 miles an hour probably the whole way. Get back. I had another mass airflow laying around from a intake that I got from a junkyard from a Mazda Speed 3. Took that mass airflow off and put it in this thing, and luckily the same thing. So it ran a lot better. So then we pulled the tank out, and the tank and the pump was disgusting and nasty and had gunk in it. Cleaned it out, put the Walbro 340 in it out of the Talon, and it ran a lot better. Then started running into issues where I realized how rusty it was. It started hanging up on the back calipers, and it rusted so bad that it broke and kinked the rear trailing arm. I mean, this thing is rot city. I mean, this thing is rough. The whole underneath of it's junk. So at that point, I decided, do I just need to buy a roller, or do I start putting money in trying to fix this shit? So I decided to buy a roller. So I found the maroon car in Greenville, South Carolina for like $1,000. STI hood scoop. It had, for some reason, only H&R springs on the front with KYBs, but the back wasn't really lowered. But it had wheels. The blue wheels are off the silver car. Those wheels were on the red car. It had a full 3-inch. Someone had blown the motor up, pulled the motor and harness out or something, but it had a tranny. So I go down there to get it. Get down there, and it was a fiasco. I get down there with the trailer. Brakes are locked up, so the kid then, or the guy he works with, took the brake line and popped it loose instead of just trying to get the calipers loose. So we go to pull it on, and mind you, the passenger side's got some scrapes down the fender, like someone's ran it down the side of something. So a little bit of body stuff as it is. So we go to get it on the trailer, and yeah, my luck. The first time I go on the trailer, the guy that had put the trailer hitch on the U-Haul did not tighten the swivel to tighten it down to the ball itself. So when I went to go up on the first time, the hitch part, the front of it popped up off the U-Haul and popped up against it. So we backed the car back down. It was just on the ramps. Put it back on, tighten it up. The second time go to get on, we got to run for it. Get on there, and I go to push the brakes. It goes straight to the floor, and boop, over the front of the ramps it goes and sits down on the front, like right where the fenders are on the frame, on the pinch weld. So I brought it come along. They went and got jacks and some boards and a big old giant pole, and we jacked it up enough and pulled it back to the come along to get it on the ramp, and started our way back. So then we pretty much took everything out of the silver car, motor, fuel setup, the PCM, and put it in the maroon car. It runs really well on like 16 pounds. Anything more than that, the clutch starts to slip in like third gear. But it's fun, it's peppy, it's enough for her. Just got to get the AC working, some little stuff. I'd like to get a ROM Raider set up and tune it myself, because I don't know who's tuned whatever that is. But so then here we are with this gym. Of course, it's got the normal broken door handle bullshit. 95, no ABS, thank goodness. That's the trouble he's got with that one there. To put a wheel bearing in it, and then it broke. The ABS sensor was broken, so I had to get a whole spindle because you can't get them, and you can't get them out without breaking them. So luckily it's a 95 like the black one. So 95 front wheel drive auto, cloth interior, 221,000 miles. It's pretty rough. Pretty rough. I've never seen the letters melt off like this in the back. My car didn't do it, and till I seen that car, and then this car has the same thing, melted off the back. Stock exhaust. It's a sunroof car, which is weird. Cloth interior, TSI front wheel drive. Cloth interior all wheel drive, no sunroof though. Then TSI with the vinyl and a sunroof, all-wheel drive. Their options were kind of weird in my opinion. So we are looking at complete stock motor. Right now it's got a weird noise. I'll start it up and you can hear it. It's got a really bad vibration. No, of course it would. Battery, of course, needs the grounds replaced. He has the guy I bought it from's got a fan rigged up, and then he's like, oh, you just plug this wire in here like so and your fan will kick on. So, and he's got all this stuff like booger welded and all sorts of crazy stuff. So we're gonna do the same thing, this thing that I did with the green car, basically. Holy crap, this thing is rough. Goodness gracious, I can't. Put this down for a second. Yeah, so he's got a bunch of weird shit going on. Power steering looks a little bit, no big deal. Everything else looks fairly clean and whatnot. I believe it's been hitting the front. It's got a little crack on the bumper, fog light popped out. You can see a crease right there. This, and then the radiator's got a gouge in it. And it's got a different hood, which is telltale. Then on the side of it, it creased it all the way back, and it made it all the way back here. But I got in there and was trying to push it out somewhat, just because it was bad, and I can't quite get to this yet. I lost a pry bar down in here trying to get it, so I'll have to get that back out later. Let's see if she'll reach in here and see if she'll fire up now. Oh, no. We're close. I'll try again. Okay, it's the ground. Gotta twist that thing. Grab. There's the vice grips out. Took an old bent 4G63 valve. Oh, finger. 4G63 valve and a pair of scissors that were tore up like those ones. My dog had chewed them off the end, so that's how I make my own handles. They made a little stop right there just to keep it from going too far. But yeah, it took a wrench and a 4G63 valve. Just kind of goofing off. So vice grips, and then see if we can get this old girl to fire up so you can hear this nonsense it's got going on. A bit bigger. Get this crap right. Not quite. Let's set this right, y'all, if I can. There we go. Nope, almost. Almost again. Oh, well. Lights on, got lights on. So the other issue was, he said someone come and test drive it, took it down the road, come back and said overdrive was gone. So I got in it and was like, oh, well, you know, no big deal. End clutches, I already put them in my other training. Never had an issue after that. So I knew what it was. Someone beating on the car in overdrive. You should never, in a DSM, in my opinion, use fourth or overdrive, whatever you want to consider it, for anything but cruising. It should be, if you need to pass, you downshift to third. If you need to do anything, downshift to third. The abuse on those overdrive clutches are not meant to take it at all. So, but I drove it home at 55 miles an hour, and that's where I noticed that vibration was really weird. 55 miles an hour the whole way home. Get close, and I was like, oh, you know, I'll just bump the button in and see what it does. I didn't think to do it the whole way driving. I click it one time, overdrive go off, and it shifts hard. It bucked and went into fourth. So fourth gear or overdrive, we consider it, is working. So we'll see how long it works. So right off the bat, you can hear, besides the bell squeak, wait for this to go away some, and the power steering whine. You can feel the vibration even. Now listen. You can hear that like a vibration, almost a buzzing noise. You can feel it in the car, which is what's crazy. So we're gonna work on diagnosing that and see if we can figure out what that actually is, and we're gonna put